Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of Necessary Roughness right here on the Bite Size Sports Network. As always, I'm your host, John Boyd, joined again today by Ben Parker. Psyched to have you back on, brother. How you doing?
I'm doing great. We got so much football this weekend. I love college football too, so I got it Thursday night, Friday night, Saturday, all day Sunday, Monday night. Boy, I just ate and ate and ate and ate. It was fantastic. I'm fantastic.
Yeah, same man. We're back in it. All those wanting days in the off season seem so far in the rearview mirror.
Yes.
Now that we have real professional football being played. Um, it was a really, really interesting week one overall. There's going to be a few things we're not able to touch on today, of course. Shout out in the comments, those of you watching at home, what you liked from what you saw from your favorite teams or any games that that we don't get to or haven't by the time you comment, and let us know what you're thinking. We're gonna touch on probably 6 or 7 games at decent depth and see where our tangents take us from there. But where I wanted to start, I think chronologically we'll talk about Thursday night towards the end here. I think that was pretty belabored by a lot of media outlets. That was obviously a pretty big primetime game. AFC Chip rematch, and we'll get into that. But I want to start with the Friday game because I thought there were a lot of issues with this game. Just the setting, and could have been, a lot of that could have been contributing factors to the quarterback play we saw, which was mostly abysmal from two pretty good quarterbacks. But I think on a grander scale too, that turf or grass or whatever they were playing on was not up to snuff. I mean, guys were slipping in and out of their breaks. We saw corners slipping, trying to stick in coverage. We saw O-linemen slipping, trying to reset. We saw quarterbacks slipping in their dropbacks, receivers slipping out of breaks. Like it was ugly. Guys, most players changed their cleats out at halftime. And that's without even mentioning the fact that they had a 2-hour bus ride to the stadium leading up to that game. This is your season opener. You're playing professional American football.
Who does that anymore?
Who does that anymore? I mean, it was everything surrounding that game was just unbelievably, questionable. And then the product we got, I think, hammered home that, this is not something either that we're ready to do yet, or maybe it's just not something we should be doing at all. Putting as much extra stress on the players as like the additional travel did. And obviously they get the long week to recover, but just for that game in particular, I think it affected the play of the game in a lot of ways that the suits may not have anticipated, or maybe they just don't care about. But I was really frustrated watching this game, and we can get into it, what actually took place on the field and some interesting things. But like what are your general thoughts on packing everybody up and going to Sao Paulo for a season opener like that with all the surrounding conditions that play into that?
Yeah, so like you said, we'll get to the on-field stuff here in a couple of minutes, but the off-field stuff, I had heard of several issues that were a problem heading into the game, during the game, even after the game. And you mentioned the number one, the turf. Listen, I actually like the international stuff. I like the fact that we can send a couple of teams to a couple of different cities, whether it's Germany or whether it's in England or whether in this case it's down in Brazil. I enjoy that because it's a lot of fun. But guess what? I don't have to put up with any harsh conditions of any kind. I don't have to put up with any logistical problems. I don't have to put up with a 2-hour bus ride. I sit on my couch and I grab my chicken noodle soup and my Coke and I watch the game and it looks the same to me as it did if they were playing in the United States. And one of the biggest obstacles for the NFL is all the logistics that are involved. It's difficult enough when you just send teams regularly to England, right? That's enough of a logistical challenge. But when you start sending them to, I mean, they haven't even sent them all the way around the globe yet, right? We're just kind of pushing out a little bit, kind of backwards expansion, if you will. And boy, when you get in these other countries, you're the NFL. You control a lot of stuff in your country. You don't control a thing in these other countries. I mean, nothing. Now, you mentioned the NFL may not care. They might not. If there's enough money sitting there for it, they may just not care. You know, they may work on that logistical thing a little bit, but for enough money, they don't care. I enjoyed the game. It did look like it affected the play. If I'm a player and I'm playing on crap turf like that, which it appeared to be, I'm pissed off. I do not like that. That's you're endangering my career now. I don't like that. You're also endangering my play. You know, what if I slip at just the wrong time and I give up a 70-yard bomb and I'm toasted and I look bad on TV? I don't like that at all if I'm a player, especially.
Yeah, and there were a lot of issues with stuff like that. I mean, they weren't allowed to leave the hotel room leading up to the game. And these are just, you add in so many things that you can't control.
Right.
And that just, it leads to so many issues. I can't imagine any of the players were huge fans of this that were involved. And from the sounds of it, it didn't seem like the stadium was particularly enthusiastic either. A lot of people who were there, said it felt like a preseason game as far as like the atmosphere. And another thing too that I thought was really interesting, like you can't tweet from Brazil.
Really?
So there were reporters texting their wives information so their wives could tweet out these updates.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah, this is what I'm talking about. Like, there's just so like exponentially you're going to run into more and more issues when there's so many things you can't control outside of the United States. So it was all nuts. That was the first thing I wanted to talk about. The game itself was a fun one, if you can kind of remove those frustrations. Like, it was back and forth. Jaden Reed was awesome. We saw a couple really nice explosives from him, super dynamic after the catch. I thought that both run defenses, particularly early on, were really interesting. And for Philly, it was the first time we got to see the Kellen Moore offense, and it's contrasted directly by the Brian Johnson-led unit last year. And we talked, I think you and I even did a couple weeks ago, and I certainly did last week on the show with Kev, how are Kellen Moore, Jalen Hurts, Sirianni's probably loosely involved, and the rest of that staff and an offensive unit, how are they going to counter the blitz this season? Because it really plagued them, particularly down the stretch last season. Hurts was terrible when blitzed and when pressured, particularly in the back end of the season. And some of that has to do with him, of course, but there also weren't many things built into the offense to combat that and to make that easier on Jalen Hurts. He didn't have hot answers when there was a free rusher. It was, more often than not, he was just throwing the slot fade off his back foot to get the ball out of there instead of something into the flat, instead of something quick over the middle. And there also was a league low amount of pre-snap motion last season from the Eagles. And I think it was something like 70% of offensive snaps did have some pre-snap motion this season compared to something like 36% last year. So the Kellen Moore experience, what he's injected into that offense, as sloppy as the game in general was at times, I think those are really good signs for the Eagles. With so much talent on that roster, like you can't just get sunk by stuff like that, by not having answers built into your playbook. And I think that looked really good. Did you notice anything else from Philly, that you found encouraging? Because I ended up picking them to go to the Super Bowl last week, and I was encouraged to see what I did on the field. What did you think of the Philly offense?
Your XO points are great there. I'll steer away from that and go back to some generics, but you're right on everything that you're saying on the XO side of things, especially for the Eagles there. So I love that, especially what you're talking about, the blitzes from last season that they were undergoing. True across the board there. Back into the generic side of it, you mentioned two competitive teams put on a fun game. These are two teams with fairly high hopes, division winners at least, they're thinking, and they put on a great show for us in spite of the sloppiness. Now, I'm going to steer it over to the quarterbacks for just a minute here, because while both guys are still kind of youngish and producing a lot, I mean, the production was there. They both made some throws that just had you scratching your head.
Yeah.
I'll start on Jordan Love, who, again, the production is there, so that's all there. He made 4 throws that had me literally jump up out of my seat and go, no, don't throw that, before the play was even finished. One was the interception that he threw. One was the pick 6 that didn't actually happen because Nakobe Dean dropped it. That should have been pick 6 all the way to the house. And then there were 2 more throws out to the flat where one was up in the air. He just kind of left it up for anybody to take. And then there was another throw that was more of a laser to the seam that he should not have been throwing. That's 4 throws that if you want to be a top quarterback, you can't do. Maybe once every 2 or 3 games. He put 4 in one game. That was dreadful. But production there. Jordan Love looked like, this is well before the injury, he looked like he wasn't himself that night. So, again, I don't know if it was the atmosphere. He just, body language, contact, he didn't look like him. He didn't look relaxed, comfortable, confident. He just kind of looked like he was grinding through it. And then you get on the Jalen Hurts side of things. Jalen Hurts does not have the arm strength to be throwing off his back foot late in a play back over the middle of the field. He's got to quit doing that, all right? He's a good quarterback that I really like, and I like his playmaking skills, but he's got to quit doing that back foot throw to tight coverage late in the play to the middle of the field. He just doesn't have that zip on the ball, the arm strength. You got to quit doing that. And sometimes he just leaves you scratching your head. So, again, I'm going to hit the running backs here in a second, but the quarterbacks, high volume productivity, but the decisions and the throws, you got to cut that out, man. If you want to be MVP and win Super Bowls, you got to cut that out.
Yeah, no, I agree. And with Hurts, he doesn't feel like he has as much juice as like 2022 in particular. Just moving out of the pocket, straight line speed, even. Still has the quad strength for a tush push here and there, but just didn't look quite as fast and shifty as he has in the past to me. And again, might have something to do with the turf. Who knows? We'll see how the rest of the season goes. For Love, on the interception, I think the one you're talking about is the one kind of up the seam. It was to either Kraft or Musgrave.
Yeah.
And not for the life of me remember who it was. I really wonder how it's coached, because I think what he might have been seeing is you get a single high safety coming over the top, and it almost looked like if Kraft, once he gets Bond in that trail technique, if he does bend that route into more of a post there a little bit anyway, and create some leverage, that looked like where the ball was going. Just really good beat on it from the safety. But that's a perfect transition into talking about Zach Bond. Holy shit. Zach Bond was unbelievable in that game.
Yes.
That's all I could watch. I mean, Patrick Mahomes threw a pick on Thursday. Is Zach Bond the best player in the NFL? I mean, he was flying around, really solid in coverage, insanely aggressive in the run game, had that sack, had a couple other hits. I really liked what I saw from him. And Nakobe Dean was really solid. That linebacker group was a huge question mark for Philly. Really, the whole spine of that defense. And I liked what I saw from Blankenship. Maddox didn't look great in the slot. I wonder if we see some more Cooper DeJean down the road, because I loved what I saw from Cooper in the preseason. I think he played like 4 snaps. But we'll kind of see how that goes. But I don't know. There were a lot of things to like. The quarterback play was jarring, to say the least, at times. But definitely some good things to take away. I think for both teams that should both still be competitive, depending on how long Jordan Love is to be spelled by Malik Willis, who in his 1 snap just took the sack when you got to just get the ball down the field and give your guys a chance. Jeffrey, thanks for tuning in. We'll get to, you know what? Perfect. We'll skip my Darnold segment for the moment and go right to Deshaun. What the fuck are we doing? So just as bad as it has been, really, since he got to Cleveland. Late as a processor, hesitant, taking an extra hitch when he shouldn't, not nearly as dynamic, breaking out of the pocket, and more often than not breaking out of clean pockets at times. Just doesn't seem to have, because he had such an innate feel for pressure and for the pocket and for what he was able to pull off early on. It would have been 2019 or 20 that he was really in that MVP conversation, the kind of things he was doing when they made the playoffs last in Houston. And we see none of that anymore. Behind what's a pretty good offensive line when healthy. I know they were missing Wills and Conklin, both tackles, but DeJuan Jones was decent for what he was able to do. It's Micah Parsons, a tough assignment, but I think and there's another allegation that's come to light that is gross. So on top of the play on the field, on top of the play on the field, you've fully guaranteed $230 million to a guy who increasingly, as more information comes out, seems to be a huge piece of shit. And on the field is not even close to, justifying any of that contract. It makes and there may be some language written in there. If this was not an allegation that he had disclosed to ownership prior to that money going into escrow, there's a chance they'll be able to get out of these remaining guarantees. And it's a $74 million cap hit next season and the following. So that would be a godsend for the franchise if they're able to get out of this one way or the other. But if they're not, it is looking rough. I mean, it's pretty close to just throwing Jameis in there, who a lot of people said in the preseason was one of the leaders in the locker room. It's getting pretty close to just cutting your losses at this point. What did you think of just the overall Cleveland-Dallas game, what Dallas was able to do to that defense, as well as, what you saw from that anemic Browns offense?
Yep. Everything that was true. Deshaun Watson, we're 20 minutes from Clemson right here where I live. He played there for several seasons, and we never heard – he was the epitome of good citizen. We never heard a single thing, not a whisper, anytime ever about him in any negative light at all. And you mentioned Jameis being a leader in the locker room is almost hilarious. Jameis used to be the head case back 10 years ago. He's the one standing on tables areas and doing weird stuff, and that's all changed. I don't know who's playing quarterback for the Browns right now, but that's not Deshaun Watson. Whatever Deshaun Watson we saw in Houston, who was ready to win MVPs and push for a Super Bowl and drag some lame roster into the playoffs, that Deshaun Watson has disappeared. And I don't know if he'll ever come back. And then you mentioned the off-field stuff. That alone, Cleveland won't say this, but you know behind closed doors, having seen him again this year, that they are working their butts off to try to make that happen, where they can get off the hook for this massive guaranteed contract for the next couple of
Yeah.
seasons and just move on. I mean, at this point, I don't think they care anymore. Let's just move on. And I don't see him getting any better. Hats off to the Dallas Cowboys for taking advantage of 2 missing tackles on the Cleveland Browns with Micah Parsons and company, just roasted them. They quit playing at halftime, basically. Dallas didn't have to play the second half. They were already completely controlling that game in every way. They didn't have to try anymore. Dak Prescott could have thrown for another 200 yards in the second half if he wanted to. They didn't need him to do that. They barely even ran the ball for any kind of a significant amount of yardage. I mean, they just kind of vanillaed their way through the second half, and that was it. I mean, just a total roast there of the Cleveland Browns. And, boy, I feel bad for Browns fans, Jeffrey and everybody else.
Yeah, it was rough. I don't know if we'll be able to, and a lot of it too. Like last season, they were buoyed by what was the best defense in football for a lot of the season. And I mean, Dallas looked sharp. Some of the Dak to CD connections, just really tight windows, good coverage from Martin Emerson, good coverage from Denzel Ward, just not good enough. And that Dallas O-line held up really well. It'll be interesting to see if that Cleveland defense is able to get back to form. With I think one of the best players in football for sure, but some really, really solid personnel around him, and one of the best secondaries in football, still under Jim Schwartz. So, we'll see how much of a flash in the pan that was, but it looked rough on both sides for Cleveland, and a lot of people had them even taking, if not kind of maintaining where they were at, and Deshaun Watson even just kind of managing the game to the point where they could eke out some wins the way they did last season, but even taking another step. And it doesn't look like that'll be the case once the tackles are back healthy. Once we see this defense in a couple other matchups, I think we'll have a fuller picture, but not looking great right now. Let's look to a couple of QBs who are on an upward trajectory. And this second-year QB duel between Anthony Richardson and C.J. Stroud was a blast. Before we get into any of the minutia of the game, before we get into Joe Mixon, before we get into any of the, just really even the scoring plays or the coaching decisions or what it was like down the stretch, how about, first of all, the 65.3 air yards bomb off his back foot to Alec Pierce from Anthony Richardson? Unreal. Like there are just not many humans who can get that ball there, let alone accurately. Just to get the ball that far from the position, he kind of like slips on his drop back. He's not rolling out, but he's fading to his left, and he just gets enough pop out of his back right foot to get some torque and just launch that thing right into the arms of Alec Pierce, who had 2 huge explosives. The Colts might be looking at a pretty well balanced receiving group, and another receiver who has shown some promise but hasn't really popped is Ashton Doolin, who caught my favorite throw from Anthony Richardson. It wasn't that bomb. I don't know if you saw it was to Anthony Richardson to his right to Ashton Doolin coming across. It was either a dig or a short post, and the amount of zip he put on that ball, I've never it was like Favre, Elway, Prime Stafford, like that kind of just absolute howitzer on a rope, frozen rope to Ashton Doolin. And I mean, if he threw that 2 miles an hour slower, it's getting picked, at least knocked away. And just to have the confidence and the fuck you attitude to say, I can get this ball there. If I just let it, if I cut it loose right now the way I know I can, I'm going to get it into this window. And the consistency again hasn't quite been there yet with AR, but throws like that, like if you can fill in the cracks, like the way Mahomes has, just really being willing to settle for the check down. The way Josh Allen's been reined in a little bit over the course of his career, you'd much rather have a guy who can do the crazy things like that and have to rein him in than you would a guy who you're like, man, he makes all the right decisions, but he can't really put the zip on the ball when we really need it in a tight window. Those couple of throws from Richardson were just unbelievable. And he did a lot of other things, and I think it was a fun game. The Colts offense needs to round out a little bit more. A little disappointed in what they did on the ground, but man, dude, I probably watched that Ashton Doolin throw 112 times. It was the best thing I saw all week, I think. What were your main takeaways from Colts Texans?
So this was a game I didn't get to watch live. I basically had to go back and catch the highlights. So I missed a lot of the coaching decisions that I think you'll get into here in a minute. But boy, you talk about a highlight reel. I don't think they could fit them all into one thing. It was basically 2 games worth of highlights here. We didn't even touch on, you mentioned Mixon. We didn't even get into him yet. But just Stroud and Richardson. Richardson's a highlight reel all by himself. That throw that you mentioned, the 65.3 air yards, there's, I think, 2 other guys. It's Mahomes and Allen in the league right now who can make that throw. I think that's just about it. I mean, and I'm not totally sure that Mahomes off his back foot like that after slipping could quite do it. I mean, he's, maybe he could. But anyway, that's the list. And then you mentioned Favre and Elway from years gone by. It's a really short list of guys who have an arm that big. And we got glimpses of that in Florida when he played for the Gators, but he played so little. And his accuracy in Florida was such crap. I mean, it was actually awful. Some of the worst accuracy in Florida you'll ever see. Worse than Josh Allen in Wyoming. Bad. I mean, talk about accuracy. But, boy, he is lighting it up. He's playing better than I thought he would. And you're right. I would rather have a guy who's got the arm strength and the quickness and looks like he can learn, which so far he's improved, right, than I would to have a guy who shall remain nameless, who kind of makes all the right decisions, but is very limited. He's always throwing in a shell. The defense can come in, come way in. It's like a guy who can't hit a home run. So you just bring in the outfielders, You're operating in that shell all the time. And the degree of your error, the degree of error that you have to work with shrinks when you don't have that arm strength. It just shrinks by a lot. And Richardson, boy, everybody's got to respect the deep throws, which means, in theory, he doesn't have to be as accurate working around the middle if he can just be somewhat reasonably accurate. Now, you mentioned he only completed 9 passes in this game. So he's got to do a little bit of that, right? He's still got some work to do, but you can see that the raw material is there. You can see him making these bomb throws and running all over the place. Boy, I mean, he's lighting it up even better than I thought he would at this point in his career.
Yeah, and when you have a guy who theoretically, from your own 30, can touch every single blade of grass if he wants to.
From your own 30.
From your own 30. I think that you're right. Like, you don't have to be quite as sharp over the middle if the clear outs you're running are going to be that scary.
Right.
And I think it was quarters on that Pierce ball, and both DBs had to have just been like, once they got almost, inside the 10, they were probably like, well, all right, we did our job.
Right.
The ball's not coming. It looks like if we got any pressure, the ball's not coming. And he drops it right over their heads. Like, if you have that, you're right. You probably won't have safety help as quick to the dig or a slant. You're probably going to have a little bit more open field, open grass in the middle. And Stroud, to me, is a little bit of a bizarro version of that. It's not that he doesn't have the arm strength. He doesn't have that tier of arm strength, of course. but he has that confidence and that moxie to throw into tight windows, to throw with timing, to throw with anticipation. He has the trust in his receivers to fit it in there and give him a chance. But he's also that very measured, mature quarterback. He navigates the pocket really well, keeps his eyes downfield, and that 3rd and 11 to ice the game to Nico Collins on the right sideline, where Collins just gets his left knee down. I mean, come on. That throw is in that same, for me, for what I like to see, that's in that same tier for me as both of those Richardson throws. Just because of the little room for error you have as a quarterback and as the receiver, and that connection that those two built over last season and looks like it's continued into this one, is just one of the, it's one of those things in the National Football League that is kind of your trump card. Rodgers to Devontae Adams, it's that Peyton Manning to Welker or Demaryius Thomas or Harrison or Wayne. It raises your ceiling to about as high as it can get when you have a quarterback who's both willing to make those throws, has the trust in his receivers to make those throws, and you have a receiver who can make circus catches, and those guys are just synced up. There's nothing like it. And I think for that reason, you talk about the other weapons Houston has. Diggs caught the touchdown. Dell's interesting. He likes throwing to Dalton Schultz. They've got this strong running game now, 30 carries for Mixon. I didn't really see that week 1. But that connection, Stroud to Collins, that will take this Houston Texans team as far as they can go. I worded that poorly, but I think you know what I mean. Like that connection is going to be kind of the rising tide that could lift all boats on the roster. And it just gives this offense an element. And you always see these types of things play out on late downs, 3rd and longs, 3rd and mediums, when it just goes right back to training camp, goes back to that timing. Montana and Rice could complete a 20-yard post blindfolded. It's that kind of thing. And I think that connection is going to be that great. Maybe not Montana Rice great, but one of the best in the league, and could really take them deep into the playoffs because you're able to get out of jams like this. You're able to, okay, let's rely on the running game. Let's give Mixon 30 touches. Let's let Kenyon Green and Titus Howard and Laramie Tunsil really get moving downhill and get a rhythm. And if we lose yards and we're sitting at a 2nd and long, if we end up in a 3rd and long, we have ways out of this, and we can trust Stroud to get us out of those jams. So you can really lean on the running game without saying, oh, well, if we don't get forward progress on 1st down, that really sets us back. You have a quarterback who can make all the throws, is really dialed in with his receivers. And that's for that reason, it's one of my favorite offenses to watch. I think they're going to be a lot of fun. I know you've got to jump relatively soon. We got started a little bit late. Let's quick cover the rest of that division, because the other two teams, as entertaining as parts of those games were, absolutely blew it. Jags blow it. 17-7 in the Miami red zone. Travis Etienne fumble. Immediate Tyreek Hill bomb. They don't score again in the game. That one is going to hurt, especially if you're late in the season and they're sitting like 8-7 and they're really just trying to claw to get into the playoffs. And you look back at week 1 and the opportunity you blew. Doug Peterson, a lot of questionable calls, and you just can't make those types of mistakes against Miami, a team who can get right back into it with a snap of their fingers. Did a really good job early on with Miami, though. What did you see from this game that you can take away positively for the Jags, even in light of that? But also, what else kind of led to that collapse? and what kind of impact that could have going forward here.
My first impulse is, what else would you expect from the Jaguars than to be inconsistent, than to look good one half and bad the next, look good one week and bad the next, and by the end of the season to be hanging somewhere around 500 with hopes for the playoffs, right? I mean, that's kind of gotten to be their MO, and I don't see that they're going to pull themselves out of it anytime soon. Everybody's hoping they do, because we all want to see this group of players here that looks very promising. We want to see them get up here and fight with the rest of the teams in the AFC, and they just kind of keep dragging themselves back down into the muck and the mire and just kind of wallowing around in it. And what's the answer? I don't know. It's not just Trevor. It's not just Peterson. It just kind of seems to infect the whole roster, So yeah. I don't think that's going to change. I'll tell you what bothers me the most about this game is this wasn't even Miami's best performance. I mean, Miami, sluggish. I don't know if that was coming off the Tyreek Hill incident, hours before the game, if it just laid in. I don't know if that's kind of missing some players and they're learning to readjust. But Miami did a lousy job running the football. They really couldn't ever really truly get that running game going the way we saw it in the first half of last year. Tyreek Hill's late stuff was pretty cool. But they weren't lighting it up early, and so Miami can play worlds better than this, we think, once they get used to playing without certain players. Mm-hmm. And Jacksonville still chokes it up. I mean, it just makes you sick watching Jacksonville do this time after time. And I don't know that it's going to get any better. I will say Trevor Lawrence had, because we were talking about great quarterback throws this weekend, Trevor Lawrence had one awesome, insane, perfect, not many guys can do that throw where he's got a tracking through the end zone. It's not a post route. It's almost like a late scramble drag route, almost is kind of what it is. And that wide receiver goes past 1, 2, 3 defenders, and Lawrence has already thrown the ball, anticipating where he's going to go. He doesn't even come full clear of that last defender. It's kind of just over the head of the last defender.
Yeah.
Perfect throw that not many people can make. And then I'll flip over to Aaron Rodgers real quick. Had not one but 2 throws during his game, one specifically to to Lazard that was just absolutely pitch perfect. Nobody else in the league throws the ball like Aaron Rodgers did on that one throw. But coming back here, Lawrence's beautiful throw notwithstanding, Jacksonville just makes you sick. I don't know any other way to say it.
Yeah, that throw was disgusting. And to first round pick Brian Thomas. That's right. Really fun to see that early on. But you held the Dolphins to 20 points in September. It's not cold yet. Yeah. You guys are playing in Florida. You held those guys to 20 points and you couldn't come out with a win. That's tough. And the Titans, as well as they played for a lot of this game, 17-0 late in the second quarter, and they let it slip away. They held Caleb Williams to 93 yards passing. They did a lot of good things on the defensive side of the ball. T'Vondre Sweat, I cannot wait to go watch T'Vondre Sweat all 22. He looked incredible. Pre-draft takes, and entirely justified. But and I don't know. This is another one of those games where you're probably not going to get many opportunities like this as the Titans. And I really like what they have going on both sides of the ball. But you can't just throw it away like that. I mean, the Levis pick has been – I talked about a ton, I think, already. But you just cannot do that. Just take the sack. And I think that's a lot of his, inexperience, trying to kind of force things, trying to make something out of nothing. You could tell he really wanted that out route on time, and then he had to move out of the pocket, and he thought he could still get it there. And you can't, man. It's the NFL. You can't do it. I couldn't believe they blew this one. What did you like from the Bears in this one? Who really, really gritty game, strong defensive game. The offense didn't score,
right?
But this is a Bears win. Your quarterback threw for 93 yards, and you pulled out a win somehow. Welcome to Chicago.
The answer to that is, other than the win, I didn't like anything from the Bears in this game.
Yeah. Kyle Orton would have won this game.
Yes, you're playing at home, sky high, expectations through the roof. Rookie quarterback, got a coach coming in who's kind of been there a couple seasons. He should know his way around. Playing what we all think is, if not a horrible team, a below average team this year, and you came out like flat. You came out like a dud. I mean, you came out and did nothing. You're getting your butt kicked all over the field. Like I think you said 17-0. This was disgusting from Chicago. But you mentioned it. They won. And that's it. Mm-hmm. And that's all that matters. They grinded it out. They found a way with help from Tennessee. They got the win. And previous Bears teams wouldn't have done that, right? Not over the past 2-3 seasons. They wouldn't have done that other than maybe late last year. Last year, they kind of started picking that up a little bit. So hats off to them. You get back in here on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, and you study your film, and you get better. Mm-hmm. And then you got Will Levis. That last interception's been talked about enough, but what bothered me about Will, unfortunately, is 19 for 32 passing, 127 yards passing. He already had another pick in this game. There were already a couple of other throws that left you, just kind of grimacing as he throws it. You're like, gee, I hope that doesn't get messed up. So they're giving Will Levis every chance to win this job. He's got the job, but to stay on here as the franchise QB. They've surrounded him with everything that he needs that they could do, and this was a rough game. And you mentioned that Tennessee is going to be grinding for every single victory they get this year. They really couldn't let this one slip away, and they did. Hats off to the Bears.
Yeah. Yeah, and you probably won't catch. I mean, maybe it's tough to predict, but you probably won't catch the Bears looking like this again.
No way. There's no way. They can't look at this.
No. Week 1 was the time to get him. I think Keenan Allen was targeted like 11 times, ended up with like 3-4 catches. He's going to reel more of those in. I think Caleb Williams is going to realize he can't, just dreidel around in the pocket at the NFL level.
Right.
And I think he'll play a little cleaner going forward, but man, you saw some good things from Levis early on. So it makes that collapse feel even worse because early on you're like, ooh, poised. Ooh, he's looks like he's progressing pretty well. That they ran this couple QB designed runs that I really liked.
4 carries, yards on the rushing side of things for Will.
Yeah,
minus out the sacks, right?
Yeah, J.C. Latham looked nice most of the time. It was, it's tough. Well, while I've got you too mentioning Latham, really quick, we're not going to talk about this game at length, but Joe Alt in his debut was really, really fun. Rashawn Slater, by the way, looks amazing. He's all the way back to form. But Joe Alt, a lot of reps against Max Crosby and held up very, very well for a rookie. I've heard the nickname floated around, Joe Alt Delete. Pretty fantastic. And they were back and forth, him and Crosby. He lost a few reps, but he hung in there. He looks really, really strong. He looks quick in and out of his sets. Have you gone back and seen much Joe Alt yet? If not, I think it's something you'd enjoy.
No. So I love Alt. I love offensive linemen. I love hardball with offensive linemen. So you can imagine, if not this year, next year, what they might be able to bully people around with, So I love all of that. And for him to do that up against Crosby, again, he didn't shut Crosby down because Crosby still had a pretty good game. But for him to be there kind of back and forth with Crosby, unbelievable.
Hats off. Last thing I simply must talk about is a segment that may be reoccurring on this show. Who knows? I like to call it Gosh Darnold. He was really good. He was really sharp. There was a 45 yard sail route to Justin Jefferson into essentially a hole shot into cover 2 that he just layered beautifully over that corner from like his own 8. That was fantastic. Kevin O'Connell, I think, proves again how incredible of a pass game designer he is, and the way he strings together plays. He's got man beaters. He's got 2 and 3 beaters. He's got quarter beaters that he now has, and this no TJ Hawkinson, no Jordan Addison for the second half of this game. Um, the things he's able to draw up, he's the way he used Justin Jefferson as a decoy. Of course, on the touchdown when it looked like it was just going to be a screen over to him, and they did the classic little screen and go with Jalen Naylor up the sideline for a touchdown. Johnny Munt would have been a touchdown too if the front side read wasn't there. He was leaking out the backside of the play. Just some really, really beautiful designs from O'Connell. And I think, what I slightly jokingly talked about throughout the offseason, trying to pump up this Darnold in the Kevin O'Connell offense thing was what he was able to do for Nick Mullins down the stretch last season, who's far less talented. I'm sure that's not how he feels internally, because he plays some confident quarterback, for better or worse. But he had a couple 400-yard games out of Nick Mullins, and what you see from him when you now have an effective run game with Aaron Jones, 6.7 yards a carry, what he's able to do playing off of that, getting into the under center play action, getting into these deep concepts where he's able to stretch the field vertically. The way he draws it up is masterful. And I think a lot of people will start to come around to the fact that Kevin O'Connell is a top 10 offensive play caller in this league. And what he got out of Darnold was great. Whether that's something he's going to be able to sustain, we'll see. But the offensive line outside of Dexter Lawrence's 58% pressure rate or whatever it was, really, really held up really well and gave Darnold every opportunity. Christian Darrisaw beat the shit out of Kayvon Thibodeau all day. All day. It was unreal. Brian Burns was silenced. There was nothing they could really do to affect the game. Did you see much of it was kind of one of those random ones in the noon slot that I was probably more locked into than most. But what are your thoughts on Darnold's early returns in this offense, and extrapolate that a little bit, what you think that could mean for the Vikings this season, especially given the Jordan Love injury?
Yeah, I did not get to see much of this game, again, other than highlights and going back and studying a little bit of the tape, because I didn't get to see it live. I got the privilege of watching Panthers Saints at the early afternoon slot. So
Electric.
Delightness. Listen, when it comes to Kevin O'Connell, I was late to the party on just how good an offensive mind he was. I've had several people telling me KOC, 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 everybody. And nationally, he's been drastically underrated. And I was part of that for a couple of years. But you can see it, especially now that the run game is back again, because that was a huge missing element the past season or two. Huge element. When you've got that to balance, it really does just set up everything for a sharp mind who knows what to do. So, yeah, I can see the KOC thing, even though I'm late to the party. I wasn't late to the party on Sam Darnold. I've watched Sam Darnold since he was playing in college and watched him a lot. And what you're hoping for from Darnold is somewhere between a Baker Mayfield, Geno Smith kind of a renaissance, even if it's only for a season or two until you get back to your long-term quarterback. That's what you're hoping for. And he's got the capability. He's got the arm strength. He's got the wherewithal. He has flashed it at times. Now, eventually, at some point this year, he's going to go throw 3 picks in one game. Probably have 2 different games where he just blows up. Just move on. That's Sam Darnold. But the rest of the games, with the running game, with all of these offensive weapons, with KFC running it, Sam Darnold has the potential to keep these Vikings competitive. And if you're competitive, you can win. Especially if the Brian Flores defense, which I love, if that defense can continue to develop and take those next steps, then you could see a totally different Vikings team than what a lot of us thought heading into the year. Sam Darnold is capable of producing that. Still got it to do. That was one game, but he's never had weapons this good, ever. Not even close.
Yeah, 100%. And the Flores defense looked really, really good. Held the Giants to 6 points, kept them out of the end zone. I got about halfway through watching every defensive snap for a piece I'm working on for zone coverage, and I'm really just trying to track coverage and track blitz rate, just to compare and contrast to last season. And early on, I mean, he was getting away with sending 4 very often, inverting a lot of coverages, a lot of post snap movement from the DBs. I think probably confused Daniel Jones a lot. Held him to I think it was a 3.8 average depth of target by the end of the game. Just had him terrified to throw the ball deep, funneled everything to the flats. Everybody on this defense tackles at a really high level, rallies and tackles, particularly the safeties. Blake Cashman moving laterally and getting to the flats and closing that gap really quickly. Looks really promising early on. So I think that defense is going to be in really good shape. And a lot of the moves they made to improve were really underrated. I think nationally, a lot of people don't realize how much this Vikings roster improved because it's overshadowed by the loss of Kirk Cousins, the loss of Danielle Hunter, big names everybody knows, right? But they didn't lose much else. Blake Brandel started at left guard. Take your PFF grades with a grain of salt, but he was top 3 in a lot of categories in this game. And of course, he didn't have much of Dexter Lawrence to deal with. That fell on Bradbury and Ingram a lot, and Ingram's PFF grade was like 9.4 or something. But, there's a lot of pieces that are going to work well together. And last thing I'll say is this was a funny movement within kind of Vikings culture right now is this season is Operation Get Sam Darnold Paid by someone else. So let Sam Darnold have the best season he can in this environment. Somebody else can pay him just in time for J.J. McCarthy to come back and take the reins. So I'm riding high, obviously. We'll see if they're able to replicate anything like that against San Francisco. Whether CMC's in the lineup or not might be a tall task, but loved what I saw from those. Obviously, there's some games we missed. Whether you watched this live or you catch it after the fact, drop a comment below. What was your favorite moment, your favorite game from this week 1? Love to hear from you guys. We'll respond to those, I'm sure, pretty quickly. Drop a like, subscribe if you haven't already. We're on the road to 700 subscribers. Want to hit that sometime this season. That would be incredible. Ben, thanks again for joining me, man. Let the people know where they can find you and your excellent work.
Well, the one we're fixing to record right as soon as I get off air here, me and Robertson Byer do the Odds On Favorite podcast. You'll probably see that late Wednesday night or early Thursday morning on Apple and Spotify. And then we've got our other football stuff on YouTube, Sports and KC. Enjoyed it.
Sweet, man. Yeah. Thanks again. And you guys can find me here every Tuesday. Also got some words on zonecoverage.com writing about the Vikings. Just had a piece go live about Andrew Van Ginkel, or the Gink Panther, as I call him. And I've got a big one coming out about Brian Flores's coverage patterns this season. So show us some love there. Come back next week for the same deal. And this has been Necessary Roughness on the Bite Size Sports Network. Thanks for everybody who tuned in. We'll see you next week.